Night Pitch, Episode 5. Justin Wick, Evan Johnson. Evan, in our last couple episodes, we've been very pitcher heavy, and we don't want to ostracize the hitter communities. So we want to come up with a topic that's very inclusive of everybody that you're going to see on a baseball roster. We're talking about the baseball bus. There's some universal parallels. Anybody that's played at a high level is familiar with the baseball bus, the setup that you typically run into. So coming from the seasoned veteran that's been on quite a few bus rides, give us the rundown. If somebody, let's say there's an average person that's never stepped foot onto a bus with a traveling team, what does it typically look like and what could somebody expect in that situation?
Well, when you get on the bus, you don't sit in the first couple rows. Those are the coaches' rows. You don't sit with somebody if you don't have to. If you're in college, that's freshman's honors to sit with somebody. There's going to be one or two guys that have claimed the very back seat or the couple in the back, and they sit there all the time. So you don't want to take those. If you're a new player to a team, you want to just play it safe and pick somewhere in the middle, right? If there's a bathroom on the bus, only number ones, no number twos, because that can ruin a long bus ride for a lot of people. That would be right. There's some main criteria, I think, of a bus ride.
Yeah, those are some standards. I think that, the other unsung part of this is that for some reason those placements never change for the entire year. It's like whatever your bus is, whatever your seat is for the first game, it's pretty much that way every single bus ride for the remainder of the season. It makes it for an interesting situation too, especially when somebody gets like called up or sent down, or if they're added to a new team, or if they get traded or something like that. All of a sudden, they don't have their spot. The people that have been there all year do have their spot, and the last thing you want to do is take somebody else's spot because they're not going to say anything, but socially it just creates a weird environment of, that's the guy that stole my seat and he didn't know it, but nobody told him, and so now it's like you have a weird rivalry for absolutely no reason that anybody will ever know. So those are, it's interesting to follow along, and I think the best protocol if you're new to a team is show up, kind of hang out, be one of the last people on the bus if it's your first time and you're joining a new squad, so that way you're not taking anybody's spot. Get there early, make sure you're on time, but once once the bus is 90% full, then you can kind of see where the openings are. As far as the actual selection process, it's pretty typical. You'll show up if you're traveling, you'll meet at the home ballpark, everybody will park their cars, you'll get on the bus, and then everybody will drive. As far as getting there, you show up, you get on time. Have you ever seen the strategies of people showing up with like blankets an hour before, waiting for the bus, and then finishing packing after they've already claimed their seat before? Is that a normal thing, or have you ever heard of that?
Never really seen that. But people do show up early to the bus.
Yeah.
I do. 'Cause a lot of times you have to, because you got to get all the crap on the bus for the whole team. You got to get all the equipment on there. But yeah, if you want to stay, one thing I'll say is if you want to be just kind of mind your own business, sit more toward the front. If you want to be involved in games or cards or whatever's going on, sit more toward the back. So for you new players, if you err toward the back, you'll get more socializing in. If you go toward the front, it'll be a little bit more quiet.
That's an important layer too, because an easy way to gel with a team is if you pick that hybrid area where you're about 2/3 of the way to the back of the bus. That's kind of the sweet spot of, you don't need to be involved, but you can also be pretty hyper involved with how it goes. I also know typically, bus setups, sometimes they'll have a card table, sometimes there'll be beds on the bus. I know that that's a handful of some things that people have been working with in the past. Different configurations. I know we're throwing all the questions to you to start this off, but not every one of them is just seats. What are some of the different variations of buses that you've seen before?
Well, I'm sure you remember St. Cloud. They had the 4 beds. Those are midway to the back. They had 4 beds. One was like floor level, and then one was up high. It's kind of had to climb in. It's kind of awkward getting in and out of those, but they had a curtain that you could close. But we always saved 2 of the beds for the catcher for the next day, the catcher of the day wherever we were traveling, and the starting pitcher. And then the other 2 were just up for grabs. And you would think that would be the hot spot, right? But over like 8 hours when you can only lay on your back. Like a lot of people don't really want the bed because they don't want to lay down for that long, and there's no window. It's just a steel wall, so you can't see out. It's really just for sleeping. So, you'd have guys rotate in and out of those a lot, and then in other situations there are seats that are turned backwards with a table in the middle, so you have a place to play cards, and those seats are pretty hot commodity. It's kind of tough when you're sitting like across from somebody though, because you can't put your feet up on the other chair. So if we're not playing cards, only like two people in each of those table spots, because you want to be able to stretch your legs out.
Well, and then those become the most coveted ones, because if you're the one facing forward, but the seats, because you could literally prop your legs up in front of them if somebody's not on the other side of the table. So there's another cheat. I know the placement that I always tried to preferred. I wouldn't sit at the table, but I'd sit across the aisle on the first chair next to the table. So that way you could be involved in that if you wanted to, but at the same time you could kind of spread out and have a pretty good time. That was always the seat that I tried to go after. And then I also know, as far as like different layouts of, it's pretty standard. You'll see people sleeping in the aisles. I know that some people have taken the cheap Walmart pool inflatables and blown those up with just.
I have done that.
They've set them on the ground and they're all good to go. It's like the biggest air mattress hack that you could come up with. Is there any like cheats? I mean, that's the glaring one that I think of, but any of the bus hacks that you can think of?
Oh, if you're going, 1 to 2 seats, right? So if you have one person in each row on either side of the aisle, if you guys want to sleep, you make a partnership with the person across the aisle from you. You say, okay, you can lay across the top seats and I'll lay across the bottom, or vice versa. So I was in Thunder Bay in the Northwoods, and the person across from me, every single road trip was Blaze Bohall. And I bought the pool floaty so I could sleep on the bottom row, and Blaze would always sleep on the top row. So we had a good system there. But you could also go hammock. You could also just go pillow blanket window, and that's a little easier. You don't really have to make a deal on that one. But I do want to talk about when it is dark on the bus and it's nighttime and everybody's sleeping. If you have to go pee and you're more toward the front, it is a Ninja Warrior obstacle course to get back to the bathroom without stepping on anybody. Like, you usually got 2 hands up grabbing like where the overhead bins are, and then your feet are on the top of the backrests of the seats, and you're like scaling all the way down to get to the bathroom. And then usually if you go to open the bathroom, somebody's in front of the door. So you kind of have to wake them up. But if that bus turns or hits a bump or something, you're hanging on for dear life because you're doing the Ninja Warrior.
I was going to say, yeah, that was the one thing that I think people do need to recognize. Keep in mind, it's like pitch black on the bus at this point, and the only thing you can see is like lights on the highway, and at the same time, you're driving at probably 70 miles an hour on a bus full of people. So the different wild card elements, I mean, I know that actually brings up something that comes to mind of a bus ride that I was on, and the differences in social, I guess I'll start with this, the social understanding of when you're pulling back into the ballpark at home. It's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning after a long bus ride. To see the dynamic of people, of everybody getting off the bus at 2 o'clock in the morning just to get in their cars and drive away. It's fun to just kind of monitor the social compass, because nobody's really social in those settings. Everybody's just kind of dragging, which understood. It's 2 a.m. But I can always remember I wanted to make it a point of, I'm going to make this entire experience so much more enjoyable if I can even just fake a smile, or if I can try to make somebody laugh at this point in time. And more often than not, it completely backfired because everybody's pissed off.
Everybody is pissed off. As soon as you land at home and it's late and you've been driving for a while, everybody is in a bad mood. Nobody's talking to anybody. Nobody's saying anything, especially when you have to move all the crap that's on the bus back into the locker room after that road trip. Oh man, it's a lot.
Geez. I can think of another bus ride that I was on. A teammate of mine, shout out to Kevin Davis from the Evansville Otters right now. Kevin Davis and I, for some reason, I was hanging out. I was staying with a host family, and they had a younger kid that we were whatever playing video games or something. Well, I put my car keys on like this table next to the sofa, and I couldn't find my keys. Like we're getting ready to go play a road game the next day. Got to be at the bus at like 7 a.m. I don't know where my keys are, so I call up Kev because he's my boy, and I'm like, dude, I know you kind of live nearby. Can you give me a ride? And he's like, hell yeah, here we go. So, anyways, his thing, and he was all about, let's save the adrenaline for when we need to get going. Like, very much conserving, let's keep everything under wraps. So he picks me up, and I come to find out that his thing was he played Sugar Ray radio, like the music group Sugar Ray. He's playing this just with the biggest smile on his face, drinking a coffee from the gas station. Like, he was thrilled to pick me up. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I was thinking to myself of, all right, well, I assume that he knows that he's going to have to drive me home, and that's another 2 a.m. drop off. So one of the coolest things that I had ever seen of the shape of perspective, and when you know that somebody really loves the game, literally, we got off the bus. He points me out. He gives me a fist bump. We get in his car. He turns Sugar Ray radio on again. And the way he was at 7 a.m. at the beginning of the road trip, and the way that he ended the road trip at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was the exact same. We're talking about baseball concepts and just having a good time and talking about the road trip. And it turned into, literally, he picked me up from then on. Like, every time we had a road game, we would drive together. And, like, the perception of this whole thing, it was the coolest. But that's kind of the good, endearing side. The tough side, and this is the other angle, this is a story that I want to share. Evan, I'm sorry, I'm kind of hogging the spotlight.
No, keep going.
We were driving, we finished a game. It's 9 innings, 7 p.m. start. I don't know, it's 10:30, 11 by the time we get back on the bus. And I'm laying in the aisle. I'm like, you know what? Am I cool here? Yeah, teammates. Yeah, no big deal. All right, so I'm just in the aisle. I hear about 2 rows behind me just this thud, and I didn't even need to turn my head to know what it was. It was one of those sounds, and you were like, that was a hydro flask that just drilled somebody in the head. Like, I mean, you hear the sound, and you just like, I don't like laughing at this, but this is brutal. So, this kid's sitting there, he's so sad. Like, I mean, you heard it, and it was just like, looking back on it in retrospect, it is kind of funny, but like in the moment, I'm just like, oh, and it's like 10:30, we're tired as hell. We just lost by like 2 runs. So you hear this, and then somebody's like, hey, was that yours? He's like, you just hear him yell back, yeah. You can tell he's pissed. So anyways, he's fiddling his stuff around. He pulls it out of the overhead compartment, his backpack. He throws it back in there. Mind you, I'm in the aisle, and I can feel, like, bags ruffling up against me, but I didn't know it was his. He's like, Wick, stand the hell up! I'm sitting here going, I can't correct you on this, because you just took a hydro flask to the head. Like, I was going back going, what did I do? But then I'm like, don't even say anything. It's not your fault. It's not a big deal. So that's another, I mean, the side of like bus awareness is something that I think is a good thing, because in that split moment, if I had a pair of headphones in, I wouldn't have had any clue. But the fact that I was laying down, I heard it, I knew why he was upset. He yelled at me, not because I was doing anything wrong per se, but just because inconveniences get a little exaggerated after you take a hydro flask to the dome here.
Yes, so, they do.
I can think of different situations like this as far as just the collective side of understanding what other people are going through and realizing that it's okay to not be the main character from time to time, especially on a bus where there are no main characters. So I know that's kind of a glaring example, but I think there's a big lesson to be learned there, that when it's time to kind of fit in, you don't always need to have the spotlight every time.
There are a lot of instances in the bus like that where people just get aggravated just because they've been sitting there for so long.
And it's actually kind of funny too after you notice it too.
Oh yeah. I mean, getting in super late and having these just long, terrible travel days, it's almost funny at some point, because you get to the point where you're like kind of pissed off, and then you get over it. And then you realize how absurd the whole travel experience was.
That's true.
And then you're kind of just sitting there thinking like, holy crap, this sucks. And then you just kind of start laughing, you know? I've had so many of these just long bus travel days where everybody's just sleeping, and you find out who people are really fast because of just
That's very true.
what they do when they're, you know, immersed in the same tiny little cabinet for 15 hours. I'd like to hear that story about Al Newman and the gas station that you had told me earlier.
Oh, dude, coming back from Canada. Okay, yeah. Well, first manager, probably one of the most amazing managers I've ever had the privilege of playing for, Al Newman, with the former Minnesota Twin, big timer.
I agree.
We're crossing the border. We're coming back into the States, and where we were driving on this particular stretch, we're coming back from Thunder Bay into Minnesota, and there's a 2-hour stretch on this highway where there's no cell service, and you're pretty much driving right along the coast of Lake Superior. So we stopped at a gas station just because, all right, so now that we're back in the United States, we're not bringing food over the border or something. We'll hook you guys up. We're going to stop at a gas station really fast. So friend of the show, Jack Barry, Australian Jack Barry, has to do the number 2 because, as mentioned, Evan says, do that on the bus. Understood. So that's part of why we stopped at the gas station, because if anybody needs it, hey, it's here for us. So he's in the bathroom. Everybody else is loaded on the bus, and we're counting to make sure that we have everybody. Because, mind you, there's no cell service in an hour in either direction. And if we left somebody, we're not going to find out until 2 days from now. So Jack's the only one that's not on the bus, and everybody knows why. So Al convinces the bus driver to pull up around the back of the gas station. So all of our players are yelling out, "Hey, you're leaving Jack! He's still in there." So Al gets on the radio of the bus, and he's saying, "We're doing this on purpose." And so we inched the bus just a little bit forward so we could see where he would come out through the first couple of rows. And then the next thing you know, our entire bus has crammed themselves in the first 1/3 of the bus, and we're holding up Snapchat videos, and he's trying to call people, and you can see him just cussing up an Australian storm while he's standing in front of this thing. So finally Al got off the bus, he walked over, and he's just dying laughing as Jack's staring at him. That was some good stuff. I mean, I could think of just some crazy details. Evan, I don't want to hog this, and I admit you've actually been on a lot more bus rides than I have. Is there anything like this? It doesn't need to be a particular story, but any particular situations or concepts that even kind of rival those types of things?
I think you might have been there for this one. I'm not sure though. We were going to Minnesota, and one of our players needed to use the bathroom. This is while we were at Creighton, and I think we had maybe 3-4 hours left. But he goes into the bathroom and he goes to pee, and the latch on the bathroom had jammed. And
that's right. Yeah, there you go.
And he's trying to open it, and it's not going. And we're trying to open it from the outside, and it's not working either. And our only option was to stop and get a mechanic to fix the door so he could get out. But that was 2.5 hours away to the Arrow or whatever bus it was, to the facility that he needed to go to. So this dude sat in the bathroom for 2 hours on the way to there. And it would open a little bit, so there's a little crack. So we fed him his phone charger in there. So that dude rode in the bathroom the whole way to Minnesota. Pretty much the whole way to Minnesota.
That's all the more reason to make sure that there's only pee in the bus bathroom in case something like that happens. Oh, yeah. That's funny. I actually thought that for the first 30 minutes of that, I thought that you guys were just messing with them, because I was 5 or 6 rows from the back, and I was just kind of half paying attention to the situation. And you guys were laughing about it, the ones that were right next to the door, and I thought it was good you guys were doing it on purpose, but it was that funny that this was an actual real situation.
He's locked in there for 2.5 hours.
Just what a loser. I thought you guys were holding it shut on him.
Just imagine, it looks like a bus bathroom. If you've never been on a bus bathroom, it looks like an airplane bathroom. It's really tiny. So just imagine sitting for 2.5 hours on the toilet seat in an airplane bathroom.
Yeah.
You get the real feel of what he
Yeah.
was actually going through.
I mean, the persona that you run into, and I mean, that's funny because I mean, you make reference to the different personalities that you're going to run into, and I mean, you find a player like this, it's even more funny if it's like a shy player that doesn't typically say much, and now all of a sudden you have a barrier of a partition that you have to work around.
Oh yeah.
Well, you mentioned as far as I mean, you learn things about people when you're stuck on the bus that long, and there is something that I kind of want to quite like ask you about as far as the personalities of the bus drivers. And this is some people that this is I would consider as far as like outside of actual dugout personnel and maybe front office people putting things in place. I think that one of the most pivotal roles on the entire team is the bus driver, just based on, what do they do? How seriously do they take their job? How friendly, how personable are they? And
How
some of
well do
like
they
the
drive?
coolest conversations that I've had. Yeah, that's also true. If they know how to read a GPS, which some of them don't. Some of them do not. I don't like to say this to be slanderous to the entire community because the really good ones out there are getting bogged down by the really bad ones. But anyways, there are like tremendous bus drivers. Some of my favorite people that I have met in this game are the bus drivers that take care of players like this. And I mean, I remember them by name, and some of them I still have their phone numbers at that point. So, the social dynamic that's there, that's one quality that I do really want to add. I also am curious, Evan, do you have a story of when they've been really bad? You
I
got
have.
anything for me?
I'm going to mention some good things too about a couple of the bus drivers that I've had.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of them, like if they drive the bus for you a lot, they'll do you favors. I remember, being done with a game and needing to take a bus back to the hotel after the game. Well, if I didn't pitch that day, I didn't need to do anything in the locker room before we went back to the hotel. So I would just throw my clothes on and I'd run over there, and like 10 of us would run over there. And he'd be like, "Hey dude, can you take us back real quick and come back?" He's like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
So we'd take us back and come back, and those guys would be waiting there for an hour, while the coaches
Yeah.
do their paperwork and get set and ready to go. But a lot of those guys will do favors for you. I've had like bus drivers where I just ask them like, "Hey dude, can you take me to a gas station real quick?" And it's just me in the front row, and he's just cruising this big bus, and it's just me and him. We just go to the gas station or something. Yeah. But I did remember one time we didn't have the same bus driver that we had the whole year, and he was not on par with the dude that we had known, obviously, because we knew him, and he was kind of just a part of the team at that point. But this guy, we stopped halfway through like a 4-hour, 6-hour road trip, and instead of going in and going to number 2 in the gas station or wherever, he did it on the bus while we stopped. So the number one rule we had was broken by our bus driver. And it was not a good one. It was bad. So the rest of the road trip, we're not able to like really say anything because he's a new guy,
Oh,
But we're all sitting there like, "Are you serious right now? Like you just did that?" The whole bus reeks. And I know he's sitting up there and he knows it. He's like, "Dang it, I shouldn't have done that." But that's one I can remember where this bus driver was just, I was like, that is just zero feel. And if you don't know what feel is, we can talk about that in later episodes, but zero feel out of that guy for sure.
Well, it's even funnier too because he's literally the farthest one on the bus from the back of the bathroom.
Yeah.
The back of the bathroom. So if there's one person that it isn't bothering, it's probably good to be him to begin with. But no, that's something. I mean, there is one thing that I do want to add as far as something that is very much respected, and this is particularly for younger players. You will often hear bus drivers talk about picking up the trash, and some buses will even have little trash bags to take with you and that kind of thing. If you're going to learn one thing about this show, it's that at the end of the bus ride, nothing shows love to the bus driver quite like picking up any trash that might be in your area, even if it isn't yours. I mean, that's a huge thing. Keep in mind, 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to do that. So what I would do, maybe we'd have a little Ziploc bag, or maybe you had a bag with the post-game spread, or maybe they provide them to you on the bus. Take that bag, fill it up with everything that you have around you. Put it in your backpack. That way you don't need to worry about it at 2 a.m. when you come pulling back into the parking lot. That is the number one sign of respect for the bus drivers that really do look out for you, and that's one thing that I do want to preach. Do it even if the bus driver's bad, because you know what? They need all the help they can get, even if they're bad. So there you go.
For sure. here's the thing: if you get home at, if you get back to the clubhouse and you get home at 2:30, the bus driver's not getting home till 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Because he's got to take the bus back to the home base, clean it out, get in his car, and go home. He's not taking the bus to his house. So help him out.
That's it, man. We're looking out for everybody here, and everybody's all in it together. So you know what? We might as well have a really good time while we're going about it, man.
Even if he poops on the bus, help him out.
Even if he does, very good. There's no jurisdiction on what does or doesn't fly. It always flies. You're always picking up the trash for you, no matter how difficult it can be, even in a situation like that, man. We are going to take a quick break. We will wrap it up with another topic that we have, starting to follow a standard format. Evan, are you having a good time right now, dude?
I'm having a great time.
Weighted runs created, abbreviated WRC, it is safe to think of this number as the modern RBI. It's a lot more objective, and one could make the argument that it's a lot more accurate. Runs batted in, the traditional RBI is highly dependent on outside performance. A 3-hitter in the batting order will often have runners on base while they're hitting, which is prime position for some RBI. If that same hitter had an identical performance in the 9 spot, their RBI total would be different simply because of what their teammates did beforehand. Weighted runs created, however, would be identical. That's because a thing called linear weights assigns the run values instead. Here to talk about linear weights. It's the backbone of weighted on-base average, which is one of the most revealing single numbers that you can evaluate hitters on. Weighted on-base average puts exact value into on-base outcomes. So the term weighted in weighted runs created comes from the use of linear weights. The WRC formula accounts for league averages and a scale number that puts an accurate value for batted ball outcomes. All of these fancy numbers are meant to compare run scoring ability and bring it down to one number. That number is represented just like an RBI total. If a player has a higher WRC than RBI, this could mean that they're being undervalued using traditional stats. WRC Plus is a scaled version of WRC. WRC Plus adjusts for ballpark and era, just like a bunch of stats with a plus and minus after it. Thank you for watching. The next time you hear or see about RBI, mix in some weighted runs created, and you'll sound a lot more sophisticated. Welcome back, my friends. Staying on the trend of baseball travel, we had so much fun talking about the bus that we had a couple other things come to mind that we definitely didn't want to not mention. Another story that I can think of, our dear friend, anonymous player, yet again. Situation early in a season for a team that I played for, I can recall, we are departing on like our second road trip of the season, so we don't have a whole lot of bus experience as a squad yet, but one particular player that went to, I guess you could consider it a school that had a pretty high financial dollar, a very white-collar type of clientele that attends the school. We're not talking about a gritty JUCO style at this particular academy. So anyways, he's hanging out kind of at the back of the bus, minding his own business. During the first road trip of the year, this was a player that had AirPods in his ears, and the manager is up there talking to everybody at the front of the bus, and he's like, "Son, you mind taking your AirPods out?" "Oh, well, they're on transparency mode. I can hear you just fine." Which you just don't say. Just take them out of your ears.
You just take them out of your ears.
Like, dude, really? So I didn't mean to be slanderous toward his school. Let me just come clean with that's the predisposition of where we're starting this story, and everybody kind of already has a negative interpretation on this player because of that one isolated incident. So the second road trip of the year, said player stands up, goes to the front of the bus, and says, "Hey, I'm getting kind of hungry. Do you mind if we stop and maybe get something to eat here soon?" So the managers, it was also Al Newman, our dear friend that we mentioned a moment ago. Al's like stared at him for a minute, and he's like, he has the look on his face like, "Are you serious?" But then he says, "Yeah, sure. Sure, man." So
wait, time out. Because Al Newman, if you knew the story of who Al Newman was and where he had been in his career, he would understand the feel of Al Newman understands feel better than anybody, probably just
That's
because
true.
of where he's been. So, Justin, if you want to tell them quickly about the career of Al Newman and who he actually is, and what
very
he might,
good point.
What he might think of when this kid asks this question.
All right, let's put it this way. The kid that was too ignorant to take the headphones out of his ears while the manager was talking to a two-time World Series champion, a seasoned veteran on the Kirby Puckett era Minnesota Twins, somebody that has then coached third base. I have another story for Al Newman that we need to share. This coached third base for the Twins in the early 2000s. Now all of a sudden he's given back. He's been around everybody in the state, everybody in that region of the country. Like devout baseball people know who this guy is. This dude has reached legend status. I never saw his World Series rings, but I can only imagine if he had both of those on at this exact situation. So, anyways, this is the dude. This is who we're working with. Player goes up to him and says, "I'm getting kind of hungry. You mind if we stop and get something to eat?" So Al, in his mind, is just like, Are you serious?" So he's like, "You know what? Yeah. As a matter of fact, we can." So the best part about this whole thing, this is all leading up to, we get close to the gas station. We're about 60 seconds out. Al gets on the radio to talk to the whole team. "All right, man. We're coming close to the gas station right now. This was a recommendation from one player on the team that we stop and get something to eat. So if you guys don't mind doing me a favor, since he needs something to eat so bad, we're going to let him get off the bus first. So everybody remain in your seats, and then we're going to let this one player get off." So he was seated near the back of the bus. We pull into the gas station. He is literally the only one that gets off the bus. Like everybody else, in a unanimous protest that was unannounced, nobody else got off the bus. Which this was, I give a ton of credit. This was the mastery of Al Newman. Like, I mean, talking about baseball feel. The way that he worded the message to the entire team meant that everybody knew not to get off the bus. But he didn't say it, but everybody knew what it meant.
Yes.
So anyways, this kid walks down the aisle. Everybody's staring at him. He gets off. He gets what he needs. He gets back on the bus and sits back down, and we drive off. This player was not on the team a week and a half later. So there we go.
That's the big thing about feel. And I guess we didn't intend to kind of get to this point when talking about travel, but a lot of traveling with your team is having a tremendous amount of feel, right? Like there's a designated place when everybody probably needs to stop. If it's just you, then you just shut up and wait. You don't go over there and ask to stop. If a coach tells you, "Hey, take off your earphones, I'm talking," you don't say, "Oh, they're on transparency mode, it's fine." No, just take them off. It's that simple, really, to just have a high level of feel. Basically, just speak when you're spoken to and don't step on anybody's toes.
Sure, and I think there's other courtesies involved too, especially like the equipment that you're carrying. There's going to be ball buckets, there's going to be fungos, there's going to be other things that are team-related equipment that you don't really want to carry, but maybe you didn't do it for 2 road trips previously. Grab a bucket on your way in. I say that. I was also the one that carried a furniture dolly, and I was already carrying 4 buckets, but I made sure I tried to get a 5th one on my shoulder from time to time.
It's a good those are the types
of courtesies that it's just a disaster. I looked like a human yard sale walking into the ballpark. There you go. You can talk about like the awareness of everything that was going on too, and I think that especially when you get different personalities. I know we talked about this with bullpen discussions in our last episode. I was saying another story about Al. We were coming back, long road trip. We were watching Moneyball. They got some monitors. Somebody put in the movie Moneyball. Right on. So one of the ending scenes of the Oakland A's that particular year is the final out of when they were eliminated from postseason contention. And they are playing the Minnesota Twins. And that was the Minnesota Twins that Al Newman was the third base coach for. So there's a scene near the end of the movie where you can see the third base coach of the Twins sending a runner home. And so all of a sudden there's the final out recorded. The Twins catch it and they're celebrating on the field. And we're watching this. It's somber music on the bus. And Al just picks up the radio again and he starts shouting out all these expletives. He's all fired up. Just the most animated and the most sad part of the movie. And here it is. Al's like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a mess. And I like that too because the personas, I know we talked about the personalities of the bus drivers and the personalities of the managers and the coaching staff and all these things that get meshed together. But it's amazing too, and this is something I'm curious to hear your feedback of. when somebody does something that's out of the norm, or somebody does something that maybe it isn't the most respected move, or maybe it's something that people kind of scoff at, if one person does that, everybody on the bus starts kind of side-eyeing each other going, did you see that? Did you think this? And that's a pivotal moment of team bonding. And the difficult side of this is sometimes it comes at the expense of somebody else. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I've talked about the conversations that we have just joking after the game. It's like, can you believe he did that on the bus? And then all of a sudden, yeah, that was incredible. Like, those are like rallying points that the unfortunate reality is sometimes it ostracizes people on the team, which is it justified? Well, if you're the one asking for snacks on the bus, probably in those situations. But it's one of those instances where you realize, I've made reference to if the spotlight isn't on you, it's not always a good idea to try to find a way to put it on you all the time. Like, it's good to kind of be a bystander in those particular sets of situations. So, Evan, I know that you actually practice this better than damn near anybody I know, and that's why you're the co-host of the show, by the way. Congrats, man.
Thanks, man. I think that the person like that would deserve it. They did this, and everybody talks about it, and of course it's a way for like people to rally around what decisions to make. But as one of my buddies said in junior college, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to be the guy that does it, so nobody knows to do it, and it happens. And it's not like they can't be a good teammate after that and make up for it. But
that's true.
You can always come back from that. And it depends on how you handle that. Like if you hear people talking about something that you did where you just had zero feel, especially during travel, you can always go up and be like, "Yeah, that was so stupid. I did not mean to do that."
Just own it. Yeah.
Yeah, you just own it. Because you're going to get, the crap end of the stick, right? In that scenario. So you're going to have to just own it, right? And just try to do better next time. But it's necessary for those things to happen because that's how people learn and make the right decisions, and people around them can see and learn and make the right decisions.
Yeah, and that's fun. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all I was gonna say. That's just the main thing there.
I think that it can be told best in the stories of you can present the concepts, but then what's the content behind this? I hate to just keep rattling off different stories that I have, but I remember this was when I was like extremely young. I don't want to give away too many details because I want to keep this person anonymous too. But like early on in my like really competitive career, there was a situation where we're on the road, we're staying in a hotel, and a particular player clogs a toilet. And it happens. It is what it is. He's trying to gain. All right, go to work. So he didn't tell anybody that he clogged it. So he shut the lid on the toilet itself. Somebody else comes in and he opens the lid. And not only is it clogged, but there's also no toilet paper in there. So this turns into one of the teammates takes out his phone and is recording a message of this player calling the front desk saying they need a plunger. And then they're roasting him, not on the fact that he clogged it, but on the fact that there wasn't any toilet paper in there. So talking about owning it. All right, so that's kind of a humiliating moment. Understood. That's why we're keeping this player anonymous. But the fact that he did own it, finally 2.5 weeks later or something like that, somebody's like, hey, be honest, did you use toilet paper? And everybody's like whipping, staring, all the conversation stop. He's like, no. And the entire team, like everybody's losing it. And all of a sudden it was funny. Like people are high-fiving him and joking around, just clowning about it. But I think of those instances of if you run scared from it, if you don't really own it, even if it's like unbelievably humiliating, even a moment like that where you should kind of rightfully be called out, that can end up turning into something inevitably that, yes, somebody will still joke about it from time to time, but the best antidote for that is embrace it, laugh with them, recognize that it is actually pretty funny, and then find a way to use it in any capacity that you can to your advantage, even if it's just a minuscule advantage.
Yeah, you got to own it. If you screw up, do something stupid, it's likely not that bad. Right? Just own up to it. Right? Oh, crap, I forgot to bring the pitcher's equipment on the road trip. That's my bad. My bad. Like, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. I'm going to make it right next time. You got to own that stuff. If you don't, what kind of person are you versus if you do? oh well, I just forgot because I was doing this other stuff and I was moving, the other equipment and I forgot. No, nobody cares. They just don't have their
Yeah.
stuff now, and that's your fault. Just own it, and it's better.
Yeah, well,
Seriously.
and that's a good point too, because I mean, if it turns into you start blaming other people for this, I mean, you don't want to give anybody reason not to play you in a situation or to have a negative reputation to where you're not. And, especially in a game of baseball where, especially early in a season where you don't want to give anybody any reason to play you, like if you're really kind of hyper concerned about the interpretations of what do they think of me, what's my impression, is there anything that potentially might withhold playing time from me? I mean, that's when you start getting really involved in a bunch of mind game situations. And I think of especially the vulnerability that comes on a bus trip in particular, because there isn't really any way for you to stand out as a person other than just your personality. Like, we're completely stripping out your on the field presence of what you bring to the table. And this is just who are you as a human. So I think that, as far as the big life lessons, and this is something that I really encourage for young players of, it's almost it's too bad that younger players don't get to see the rigors of travel. I don't really wish it on them either because I would hate for like a 12-year-old to have to ride 7 hours on a bus every other day. But I think of like the social lessons that are really to be had there and recognizing the awareness of who you are and the kind of people that exist there. It's okay if you want to be to yourself every so often. I mean, I've known from time to time if you're on a long bus drive, at least an hour of it, I'm going to have probably headphones in or I'm going to be sleeping, and that's okay too. But the other side of recognition that there's a whole lot of other cooks in the kitchen in these different scenarios, and especially the higher up you get, the bus is full of alpha males that at some point in time were the best player on whatever team they were leading up to where they are at that given moment in time. So I think that that type of persona of you used to being the man. At some point in time, you knew what it was like to have everybody eating out of the palm of your hand as a player. Now all of a sudden you're surrounded by 30 to 40 of them, and you got to find a way to manage all of those personalities at the same exact time.
Yeah, I think. I mean, to delve kind of down a different, path of conversation. Like everybody has a reality check when they get to college or when they get to like a team where they're playing. Their top ability level is now the average. Right? Everybody has that reality check. If you don't, you're really, really lucky because that means you're really, really, really special player. You're very good. Right? The people that can still be, a good person and not make who they are, like their ability level, a part of their identity as a person, are typically some of the best people to be around.
Yeah,
Like if you have a guy who's
that's a really cool.
yeah, you have a guy who's really good, like Shohei Ohtani, who's also a fantastic teammate and a fantastic person off the field. That speaks volumes about him as a player. That makes him even better. It's the same kind of person as like Michael Jordan, right? Or like Tom Brady, right? It's those
Yeah,
legends that they don't get that status from being just a good player. You got to be everything. And travel and going places with your teammates is where you find out who those people are, and that's where you make an impact on your teammates. And that's when, you do go out to the field. They know you from all those outside experiences, and they,
yeah,
cheer you on because you're a helpful player. You help them with things. You take care of your business. You're kind. You're nice. All those other things, and that makes you, that helps your teammates push you on the field. It
yeah. That's a really cool.
yeah. It covers more than what you think. Doing that stuff covers more than what you think. It's less about how you play. It's
Sure.
more about how you are. Honest.
I think that's kind of interesting when you follow along of when you actually have those integral conversations with somebody and then all of a sudden you see them on the field. I can think of times where I sat next to a second baseman of their conversations as a hitter are a lot different than the conversations that I had as a pitcher. But, we hadn't talked for a long time. All of a sudden here it is. Hey, what are you doing? I'm sitting next to you today. Maybe I moved over there. We are just hanging out for an hour. We're playing 8-ball pool on our phones together. But, next thing, we're hitting second or third in the order. You had had a lengthy conversation with them. And now all of a sudden you're watching game that you traveled to with a completely different appreciation of, I hope this kid has a day today because we had a fantastic time on the bus. And I think those components of realizing that you get to meet somebody on such an integral level you otherwise really wouldn't be able to meet somebody at. And I can attest to, myself kind of being in the workforce of the inner workings of the game of baseball now. One of the biggest detriments that I feel exists without putting on the uniform anymore is that you really don't have such a casual situation like a bus ride where you get to meet somebody at such a grassroots level. And that's one of the most pure things that I think exists at the game of baseball. So another thing that I want to add in there, I mean, and are kind of turning into the travel episode, what do you do on the bus? And I think of the games that are played. I mentioned 8-ball pool. That's what you and I did. I know that we played Uno on our phones. We had the digital version of Uno that was fantastic, and we put like $1 bets on games, and we'd have a blast, and we'd Venmo each other $1 if we lost the game or stuff like this. I know the classic card deck is something that goes around. When Among Us was big, I know that was another minor league thing. Are there any others that come to mind that that you've used to pass the time?
There's phone games. I think the most memorable games for me for the bus would be like a Mafia. If I'm sure that not a lot of people are familiar with Mafia, but it is a game played with a large number of people. There's Password. People like Password. That's a 4-player game. But Mafia would be like you could get the entire bus involved. All 35 guys could be involved in a game of Mafia. And those are a lot of fun. Some people don't like Mafia as much as others because they get singled out by a group of people, which is just kind of...
It's true.
It's just kind of what it is, but that's just the joy about playing those games. I really enjoyed Mafia. I remember playing Mafia on not a bus, but a plane. I remember playing Mafia on a plane, a commercial flight, playing Mafia. Because flying with your team is much different than busing with your team. It's almost true. Flying is almost less interactive. There's less stories because everything's so structured, But that one time we played Mafia on a plane, I thought that was pretty legendary. We were able to get a Mafia game in on a, commercial flight with 20 plus people. That was pretty cool.
It starts to take new shape. For any viewer that isn't familiar with the game, the setup is you get like standard townspeople characters and you get sheriff characters. And for lack of a better term, you gradually kill people off one by one. And then you got to put your head down while the sheriffs are there and then while the mafia is there to kill other people. Like that.
Nobody knows nobody knows anybody's role except the only person that knows your role is you. So that's the kind of debate part is they can kind of lie and say like, oh, I'm mafia or I'm a townsperson or I'm a sheriff or whatever. And then there's other rules that, add structure.
We can do a whole episode on that in and of itself, man. Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, I think it's one of the funny elements of this, and I heard somebody talking about a story on this. A JUCO coach of mine, when he was managing a summer team, he said that they were playing a game of Mafia, and the narrator, the person that picked the roles, picked every single person as a townsperson. So there literally was nobody, it was like the game was a complete sham. And so the narrator is running the show saying, yeah, this person was killed. And he's playing it off and everybody's calling each other out, not knowing that they're all on the same team. So those are the good ones too, because you're able to create memories like this and you're able to kind of take ownership of a collective group of people, just how you present yourself in their eyes. And I think about, the other side of things, now that this really comes to mind, is knowing how to present yourself. And I think that the public speaking style of, it's not that a bus is a hostile environment, but it's an environment where it's very difficult to have unless you're sitting next to somebody, if you're addressing like a group of 10 to 15 people, your interactions are very short because chances are somebody else is going to yell something and then they're going to yell something. So I think the sweet spot of being a really good bus communicator is knowing how to say really short 2 to 3 sentence bursts that just get people fired up for whatever it is.
Yes.
Like that's another element. Like interpersonal communication takes a completely different shape when all of a sudden you get all these people crammed into such a tight space.
Oh yeah, the common theme of somebody saying something on the bus, if they're saying it to the whole bus, it's one sentence or one word. It could be one word that just gets everybody fired up, but you just hear it yelled out somewhere on the bus. You don't know where, but you likely know who it came from. And that's usually how bus conversations go. It's just it's a mad free for all, and it's a ton of fun. And while the bus trips that take 14 hours, that you're in the dark for 8 of them, suck. A lot of the team bonding is done on the bus, just as it is in the bullpen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think another added benefit too is when you start the season on the road. I always liked when you look at the schedule and you see the first 3 or 4 games of the season are road games. That means you get this right away, like right out of the chute. And I think it's a superhuman advantage when you're able to gel like that and to get things going. And I think that sometimes some of the more successful teams, I don't know if this applies nearly as much to big leagues because you have spring training where more often than not you're in an outside setting and then moving in anyways, and you've already had that moment to gel, and then the teams are a little bit more consistent. But I think especially in the amateur ranks, even just the structure of when the trips happen, and then I always liked when you finished the season on the road and you're taking the bus back last time as opposed to saying your goodbyes, the final game being a home game. I kind of liked that extended goodbye, although I also like being able to end the season in front of the home fans too. So the seasonal implications that really go into it is you start to recognize that you have the opportunity to cherish these moments. And that's the joy and that's the sanctity of these games. And that's when, the bus itself may not seem like a sacred place, particularly when you've familiarized yourself with how it goes, but to recognize the weird ways that things can be disguised as sacred operations within this game. In many respects, the bus trips have something to do with that as well. So, Evan, I'll give you the floor. You got any final thoughts to cap this thing off for us?
Appreciate the bus trips. I mean, as much as they sucked, I look back on them, and there's so many things that I learned, so many fun experiences that came out of the bus, even though at the time it sucked. That's what made it the most fun. If it didn't suck, then it wouldn't be as fun. So just keep that in mind whenever it does start to suck on the bus. That this is what's going to make it memorable. This is what's going to make it fun. And like you mentioned, you realize how important those are when it becomes to the last bus trip of the year. Right? Yeah. And you're going home and all the people on the bus are there, and you stop at a gas station, everybody buys a bunch of beer or something, and it's like, all right, we're going to have a great time for 9 hours because there's nowhere else we can be except right here, right now. And we're going to be in the moment with our friends and hanging out. And that's when you realize that it's a good thing, that it's a fun thing to do.
It's one of the most pure interactions that you will find in this game. And I think that's part of the joy. I'll add in one final time is just to embrace it. Because honestly, the fact that fate put all of you guys together at one particular moment in time, yes, it becomes normal. Yes, it becomes mundane when you're doing it over a long season. But when you recognize the integral moment of find a way to embrace the lifestyle that you lead and the opportunities that you have in front of you, those are opportunities, and those can very much end up being the culminating moments of the background that you bring into what you're going to bring with you in the future of all sorts of relationships that you develop. So some of the best bus trips that I've had, Evan, they featured you, dude. There you go.
Agree.
Congrats.
I agree with you. They featured you as well.
I'm flattered. That doesn't mean that they had to have Evan on it in order for it to have a good time. I've had other good bus trips as well. My friends, this has been episode 5 of The Night Pitch. I'm having an absolute blast keeping these things rolling, and we don't have any intentions of slowing down anytime soon, so keep sticking around. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are going full blast on social media. We're stepping up the reels that we're putting out on Instagram. Of course, the YouTube channel going strong. Whatever Twitter/X is called yet again, we're still rolling there, putting all sorts of stuff out there, and absolutely love to see the interaction of all of the faithful fans that are starting to follow along, starting to catch our lead. We're going to have guests in coming to the show. We're going to keep pumping out all of the cool details that we've got. And if you've got a topic that you want us to talk about, throw it on any one of those social channels, and there's a good chance that Evan and I are going to see it, and very well you are going to find that on a forthcoming episode. So thank you guys very much for making this making this the best part of my day. I'm just going to go ahead and crank that out. Of course, huge shout out to my co-host, Evan Johnson. My name is Justin Wick. This has been episode 5 of The Night Pitch. Let's do another one tomorrow. You cool with that?
Yeah, I'm in.